Welcome, everybody. I think we can get started now. Foster and Sal, am I audible? Okay.
Sure.
Thank you for joining us for the Connecticut Technology Council's monthly Tech Talk. I'm Nancy Hancock. I'm an attorney at Pullman & Cumley, and I work with technology-based companies and their owners. I'm moderating this Tech Talk as a member of the CTC Board of Directors. The CTC Tech Talks is a series of monthly webinars on current topics of interest to our CTC members and to the Connecticut technology ecosystem at large. If you have a topic you would like to present in the future, or if you have a suggestion for a topic you'd like to hear about, please contact us at events@ct.org. As you know, today's topic will be IT security planning, presented in the context of the recent Colonial Pipeline cyber attack. Before I introduce today's speakers, let me first review the ground rules for today's Tech Talk presentation. We will be recording the event and will distribute a link to the video and a copy of the slide deck after the event to each registered attendee. The presentation will be followed by ample question and answer sessions, so please submit your questions at any time during the presentation by clicking the Q&A button on your toolbar and typing in your question. Now let me introduce today's team of two speakers from Charles IT. First, Foster Charles, who is the founder and CEO of Charles IT. In spite of what you're reading on the screen about him, if you ask Foster what he really likes to do, he's a person who helps people. His passion in life is providing his clients with accessible, cutting-edge technology and showing them how IT can be an exciting and effective tool to help their businesses. He also loves nothing more than sharing exciting life experiences with his devoted team. How would you love it if your boss took you on helicopter tours in the Grand Canyon or racing Ferraris in Hollywood? No outing is too grand for Foster. He makes these experiences available for his team. He's a true visionary and is committed to growing his company and his people to be the best they can be, and he has created a team of individuals who are dedicated and proud of the work they do. Foster is very active in Middletown. He heads up the technology committee and is actively involved in the Middletown Chamber of Commerce. When he's not in the office, he loves to spend time with his family, especially his daughter Harper, and he enjoys swimming and CrossFit. The other exciting presenter will be Sal Marino, Finance and Operations Manager at Charles IT. Sal has a degree in accounting from Southern Connecticut State University and an MBA from Southern New Hampshire University. Not to draw too great a contrast to Foster, but Sal is a numbers guy through and through. More than just an accountant, he's also a certified fraud examiner. His favorite part of working with the team at Charles IT is learning about the newest technology and figuring out ways to improve processes. Weird, mine would be the Grand Canyon and the Ferraris, but okay, Sal. As a Middletown native, Sal is very active in the community as a coach for the Middletown High School Ultimate Frisbee team. In his spare time, he enjoys playing Ultimate Frisbee and basketball and hanging out with his wife, Libby, and his two dogs, Maya and Booker. Enough preliminaries. Let's go to Foster and Sal and hear what they have to say.
Great. Thanks, Nancy, for introducing us. We're from Charles IT. So Charles IT, as a overview of what we do, we are Connecticut's compliance experts, specifically in technology. So we're located in Middletown, and our entire business is based on making sure that people are taking a look of compliance through the lens of technology. So much of these compliances are now based on the technology controls and best practices that are implemented. And that's really what our niche is. So we're about 45 full-time employees, and we're servicing over 100 clients throughout Connecticut. And our primary focus and what we really care about is creating real relationships and what we call raving fans. I really want a relationship with our clients, and we're not a transactional kind of help desk. We tend to be a little bit more in your face than the average IT company. And we like exceeding people's expectations and trying to convert people to being raving fans for us.
So for us today, we appreciate you guys taking the time to talk with us and hear some of the stories that we have to talk about. And we don't want to take up too much of your time, but what we will cover today during the webinar here is going to be talking about the recent ransomware attacks. So the Colonial Pipeline being one of the big ones. Another one we'll refer to is a relatively even more recent is a McDonald's breach that just happened as well. We'll talk about the importance of security awareness and what exactly that is. We'll talk about some of the best practices and things to avoid so that you don't fall subject to a ransomware attack. And then we'll also talk about the financial impacts of what a breach will be to your business and what you can do to prevent that and what the financial impacts are if you were to prevent it from happening. So we'll cover all of those in some broad topics, and then we'll jump over to a Q&A and answer any questions that anyone from the audience might have for us. And then at the end, wrap up with some closing thoughts.
So I'm going to go first because I'm far more entertaining than the numbers guy. What I'm going to be focusing on is the Colonial Pipeline attack. So for those who don't know what the Colonial Pipeline is, it's the largest pipeline system in the United States. It's carrying about 3 million barrels of refined oil products per day. And that's between Texas and New York. And for like understanding, that's about 45% of all the East Coast fuel supply. So they were attacked, and they were attacked that was confirmed by the FBI and by a group called DarkSide. DarkSide is basically a Russian cyber criminal organization. They're a hacking group. They all get together, they have a target, and then they hold these companies ransom where they do certain things to get financial gain out of it. And they are specifically a known Russian cyber criminal group, and they do very targeted attacks. So they got paid out $4.4 million from that specific attack in exchange for the decryption tool. And basically what happened was on May 7th, operations were shut down after discovering the attack. So all the fuel shortages ensued. The consumers started just buying out of panic of gasoline because of the supply. But what my goal here is to tell you a lot about what you might not have known or some of the background information. So what was interesting about the pipeline is this was a proactively shut down system. So it's the fastest way to reduce damage. So let's say you get a cyber attack or you have ransomware yourself. The fastest way to reduce the damage is you shut down all the computers. So actually what happened here is at 5 a.m., they were notified on May 7th. By 6:10, they shut down the entire pipeline. That's super impressive because that includes escalation to the manager. Then it was handed off to IT on call, and then they started shutting down the whole system. And to be able to shut down a network that big was actually pretty impressive. So they did exactly the right thing, and they shut down everything very quickly. It still took them a week to recover because you shut it down to stop like the bleeding and stop the damage, but it still took them a week to recover from that, from recovering from backups. So they came back up online around May 12th, and that's about 5 days of total outage and they responded that quickly. So some of the other fun, interesting things about it is what's crazy about this attack and why it got so much attention. There's been tons of ransomware, like you had Atlanta completely get ransomware for about $11 million. It cost them a year or two ago. You've had entire states get ransomware. You've had colleges, universities, that kind of thing, hospitals. But what was interesting about this one and why it got so much news is this was an infrastructure attack technically on the United States. So what you didn't see here is that this was like seen as a form of terrorism because you took out a key part of our infrastructure for the US. One, they stole 100 gigabytes worth of data, so they pulled all this information out. But the big concern was all that infrastructure. What did they capture? And it was, they thought it was a terrorist attack. So basically they thought that was what happened. And when they shut down the whole system, what really took them a huge amount of time, one, they had to restore from their backups because you want to make sure that nothing on the system. Like once you've been infiltrated, you want to make sure nobody had these backdoors. So the best practice is to restore from these backups and make sure that you know exactly what is coming back on your system. But what most people didn't notice was going on is they actually tracked all 29,000 miles of the pipeline from the ground and air and looked for any visible damage, because all the systems were shut down. They couldn't monitor what was going on in the pipeline. So, or if something was being adjusted or altered. So that took a huge amount of time, and why it actually caused such a big downtime from them. And another fun fact, on June 7th, actually, the US Department of Justice did a surprising announcement, and it claimed to recover the majority of the cryptocurrency that they paid. So they paid out $4.4 million, but the government actually recovered 63 Bitcoins. And anybody tracking Bitcoin dollars, that at current value, and it's depreciated even since then, that still they recovered about $2.5 million. So this also, even closer in recent news, is that this also led to a meeting at the G7 summit recently, where Russia and the US started talking about, okay, will we trade hackers who are attacking each other's countries? And so like it's leading to some of these like first time controversies. Is this terrorism? Is this state sponsored? Are we going to be exfiltrate somebody from Russia and be able to hold them accountable to it? So this made a lot of news because it wasn't a random ransomware attack. It was largely seen as terrorism and how a major impact of a computer system could have on the country. So what a lot of people want to know is how the heck did it happen? So this was basically a breach that was traced back to VPN login. So yeah, everybody's usually comfortable and knows what a VPN is. So these credentials on the VPN login to like connect to the network, they appeared on the dark web. So what that means is that they were released with a bunch of other passwords. And it also means that the employee probably used that password on other accounts that was breached and publicly known. So, hey, I have MyFitnessPal that has a publicly known breach 2 or 3 years ago. And, oh, I happen to use that password also for my VPN. So somebody connected the dots. Oh, I have MyFitnessPal. They used the same password and they got access to their network. So this login was just old. It wasn't being used. And this is basic cleanup stuff. This is like, you don't use the same passwords. Lots of VPNs now are tied to like your email login or your computer login, those things that drive you crazy by having to rotate it every 90 days. That craziness is really because of this. This credential was super old. This is something that wasn't rotated. So it allowed hackers to just enter in the system on April 29th. They had full access to do everything they needed, and they were unrestricted. Nothing got in their way, nothing notified anybody. They just weren't able to pick it up at all. So most people, they're interested, how the heck can this be avoided? So there were so many failures here. So you had the no multi-factor. So multi-factor is a must now. So for those of you who don't know what multi-factor is, like you sign into your bank, you get that text message. That average, we wait for the consumer world to be trained on things that are acceptable and aren't a royal pain in the butt. And so most people are used to multi-factor of logging into sensitive systems. And so implementing that was super important. So that would just avoid to know this is who they say they are and confirm it was the owner. The other part is just old passwords. So get those cleaned up. We recommend reviewing old passwords or systems or accounts that aren't used every 6 months. And then we have password managers. So user manager or sync them. Most organizations, they have a shared password system that the employee or team member can't see the actual password, but it logs them in. So you don't have to rotate passwords all the time, or everybody has their own individual. My personal preference is that I link it up to what my email or my computer password is. So that password's naturally rotating. It's way easier on everybody else because they only got to remember one username and password, like what's my email, what's my password. That rotates a lot, and it keeps everything secure. And then the other part is dark web monitoring. So dark web monitoring is making sure that anything that's publicly released and it gets available out on the dark web, people are notified on. And then they And then there's other parts of it where having MDR, which detects behavior, and security awareness. So there's so many failures of where this happened. They didn't have the 2FA. They didn't have the password on the VPN connected to their email login. It was an old login, no dark web monitoring. And then there's other security protections you can put in place that would even detect something funky or weird happening where, okay, I rarely work and connect at 3 a.m. in the morning. Oh, there's a random connection at 3 a.m. morning. Somebody should go look here. Something is strange. So there's so much that multiple failures that could have been fixed and driven here.
So Foster talked a little bit about the Colonial Pipeline, and that's definitely one of the most well-known recent attacks that has hit all the news headlines, and people generally hear the most about that. McDonald's is another one that has recently just been impacted from a breach. And this happened relatively recent, but the reason why you haven't heard a lot about it is because it wasn't as impactful in shutting down the business in the same way that the Colonial Pipeline was done. Part of the biggest difference between the two was McDonald's had they had caught this. They caught it on their internal security system. So they had a little bit more of a security infrastructure in place to be able to, catch the breach ahead of time. And so the major thing here was that no customer payment data was accessed in the breach. So really the only things that were taken out of this were the contact info for the franchises, seating capacity of the stores, some basic information of those organizations. And so it wasn't a direct hit on any PII to give people's information away. There was also no ransom request that was made by the hackers. So the sensitive data portion, which the Colonial Pipeline had a huge piece of sensitive data, that wasn't released. And so there was no ransom. And as I mentioned before, the key there was the good cyber hygiene that McDonald's had in place to prevent that from happening. So you may think, why is this important? And the reason that this is important is this is typically what would happen in a breach, right? So you hear about the big ones, and those are like the extreme circumstances where you're like, holy crap, that just happened. And they're in a world of pain now because of that. More times than not, you've been breached and you don't even know. They were able to catch it because of their current security hygiene and what they have in place. But what happens is they're looking for that information so they can go and grab that contact info and then use that info somewhere else. So on the dark web, one of the key things that they can do is they can go and grab people's information, right? They'll go try to grab your password or your logins, and that's what they'll put on the dark web and try to go and put that into any other potential websites to go and get your passwords and log into those to gain more information. The other thing that they get from this information is they start to leverage phishing emails. So most people are familiar with phishing, and you'll know that you've gotten an email saying, hey, I have this money in another country and I need your help to be able to get it back. Or I have this, you get an email from Foster saying, please go grab me some iTunes gift cards and scratch off the back and send me photos, right? And those are the phishing emails that generally most people see. But the key to why this is important is the information that they took from McDonald's in this breach is going to be able to allow them to make those emails be much more personalized, right? So it's going to tie into that business a little bit more in particular. So they might have an employee's name, right? And they'll be able to say, hey, I need to go and purchase these things because of something specific about that organization or the seating capacity, like the square footage. They're able to use that information to be able to make it a much more targeted email, make it a little bit more believable. So then your organization, someone in there might actually click on a link or actually drive towards it. So, that's one of the big things that we have that we pulled out of what this McDonald's breach is. And it's something that is typically, it happens way more frequently than the Colonial Pipeline shutdown that you saw.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people understand, this was a breach. Most people don't care because it only affected the owners of this, but they now have thousands of shots on goal to try to get somebody to make a mistake, and they have very targeted information. So take an example of like, okay, hey, Mr. Generic person, I need a gift card, or I have a rich uncle and I need money. It's very generic and broken English and all this. That makes it very obvious. But now say, oh, hi, Bob. I'm Chris James from corporate. I'm renewing all the cleaning agreements with McDonald's post-COVID, and I'm reaching out for all the Connecticut franchises to get and confirm information for each store. It looks like you have 800 square feet of play space. Would you mind filling out this form to make sure it's accurate? I really need this for my boss on Friday. So instead of it being super generic, it's, wow, he knows my name. They're referencing somebody I do business with at corporate already that does handle the cleaning agreements, all that stuff they can pull offline. And they know who I am, how much square footage I have. So, wow, they must be who they say they are. And then all of a sudden, oh, can you just fill this form for me? And I get this prompt to like log into Office 365 to fill out a form. And then bam, somebody clicked on it, somebody has the credentials, and they have 1,000 really highly targeted things. So even if you're like, oh, well, I don't care, they didn't get my username and password, it's still information that can make a very, very targeted phishing attempt called a spear phishing. It's very targeted. So as much as it didn't affect us, it will probably affect McDonald's probably for the next 3 to 5 years.
And so with that, the McDonald's one in particular, that makes it so important for us, it ties into the security awareness, which is training your team to help prevent phishing email to actually wreak havoc in your environment. So for us, if you were to ask what's the most critical point of failure in a security posture, for us, it's usually your team. Your team is generally the weakest link, right? Because you have to train them to make sure that they're being prepared. They know that this is a typical email that comes my way, and they have to say, hey, this doesn't look right, or what's the right things to look out for. And so for us, one of the key things that we have all of our clients go through is security awareness training. And for us, basically what that is it's an email campaign where it starts to crank up the targeted emails and really start to go after the team and say, hey, this is your HR department. We need you to update this payroll information, or this is your IT department. We need you to rotate this password. And you're clicking on these links and testing you whether or not you're actually putting your company at risk by clicking on one of these potential email campaigns. And so for us, the baseline here, you typically run through this and you have a pretty extreme first round in your baseline, which shows like, hey, this is how many people could potentially click that link. And honestly, if you have more than one, that's a problem, just because all it takes is one person that could potentially expose your entire business and have them start to get into your system. So for us, we utilize something called KnowBe4. It offers different trainings outside of the email campaigns that we set up and put in place for all of our clients. It also has required annual or semi-annual trainings. It kind of goes at what your preference is, but at least annually, we're recommending that you put your entire team through this baseline training. And then if someone fails, it enrolls them in additional training to try to make sure that they correct those mistakes and they don't fall subject to potentially clicking on something. And those will go in different varying levels, whether they just open the email versus clicking the link versus actually entering information into something. So it'll go at a bunch of different levels, but the goal here is you train your team. They're going to be, they have the most access to all of your systems, and all it takes is them to click on one link for that to be able to go in the wrong direction. So for us, security awareness is one of the most critical pieces of the security puzzle for us and our team. And we recommend that everybody has their team being trained.
Yeah, and what's crazy is even the graphic that you see on the screen, those look like nice round numbers. I can tell you from just our clients alone, the average baseline when we first implement it is around 27%. 27% of the people going through it are initially phished or click on a bad link. And it cuts about in half about 3 months later, and usually around 12 months, everybody's gone through it, and we see it anywhere from 2 to 4%. It was like 3.7%, I think, for us. So these are numbers that we watch, but it absolutely, like 27%, out of 100 employees, 27 of them will fall for it. And getting that down to 2 is just far less exposure. It's a great thing to be able to run. So cybersecurity best practices for some of the techie people out on this call, and then for the non-techs, I'm going to try to go through it and balance between each one. So,
I can help break that part down.
Yeah. So for what the heck is all this stuff? You're looking at what I'm going to go through is all the security expectations from all the compliances that we cover. And then also what I think a lot of people are missing now is that cyber liability insurance is doubling or tripling in price. And it's largely because of these ransomware attacks. And these policies are now asking for all of this coverage. And depending on how well you're covered, will affect your premium for sure. So the first and easiest one and probably least expensive is dark web monitoring. So dark web monitoring, it is known breaches, known passwords, your passwords that you had. There's been a Dropbox breach, there's LinkedIn, MyFitnessPal. Like these are 3 major things that people go, uh-oh, I have one of those. And these have been public breaches. Your password is out there, and most people have not rotated their password. So Charles IT for you will run this for free for anybody. If you're interested in it, you can email us. My email is foster@charlesit.com. I will run this for free on your domain, and I'll just send you back the results, because people are just, and it reads you off the password. I will tell you what that password is online and what that person's password is. And it's crazy. I don't think I've ever run it against somebody and not had either a current or ex-employee show up on that report. So don't reuse your passwords. The dark web monitoring is for people who have reused their passwords, what's out there, but don't reuse it. Bad. Don't do that. The second part, multi-factor, exactly what I said before. This is the bank method, right? When when you log into something, it's sending you a code or authorizing who you are. Fun fact for the techie people out there, the text messaging is not technically approved by NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards of Technology. It's basically what the government sets as the standard. So when you're like, oh, I have HIPAA or ITAR or CMMC or one of those things, all those reference NIST. NIST are like the actual standards you need to do. Text messaging is actually not a super protective way of doing multi-factors. Multi-factor is better than no multi-factor, but text messaging is like the next thing you got to move on to. So, but that's a great thing that you can verify to do. Managed detection and response, MDR, you'll hear me say MDR. This is souped up antivirus. This is, everybody gets it confused with antivirus. It's not the same thing. This is really behavior analysis. So like antivirus sees Dropbox and goes, I know what that is. That's cool. I'm going to let that do what Dropbox does. But MDR might see 100 gigabytes from the Colonial Pipeline getting uploaded to Russia, and he goes, I don't think that should be happening. And although I know what Dropbox is, this behavior is weird. Or, hey, you just connected at 3 a.m. to a VPN. That person never logs in at 3 a.m. And that's what it blocks. It's 24/7, 365 monitoring. There's actual humans monitoring it. And it's the biggest hurdle you can really install for hackers. It just makes it, you're setting up so many hurdles for people that are like, screw it, I'm going to attack somebody that isn't nearly on their game, or it's just an easier target. You want to be not the slowest. Everybody see the meme with the bear chasing. You don't want to be the slowest runner. That's what your goal is. You want to make sure that you're one of the fastest runners. You don't want to be one of those targets. And then you got the security awareness training, what Sal just went over. It's the best bang for the buck, training the end users. You can have the best security system in the world, but if you're handing out the security pin to your own security system, it doesn't really help you that much. So we need to train the users so they don't give away that pin. The other big thing about it is that why this is so effective is we create just the right amount of pain for the end users. So when you click on a link, when you first join the organization, you go through a 15-minute quick training. So as soon as, hey Sal, welcome to Charles IT, one of the first things he does is his 15-minute training, and he goes through it and he just learns some of the basics, and that avoids most of the problems. But if then he goes and clicks on a link 3 months later, we enroll him in a 45-minute training. So as soon as people fail for these things, they go through a 45-minute training. It's painful enough where people will, next time Sal wants to click on a link, he hovers over, he's doing everything he learned in that 45 minutes. And he's like, I'm not falling for that again. I do not want to go through that training. And we'll try to make it interesting and change it up and make it more adaptive. But you want to create enough pain so people think before they click. Plus, it has all sorts of other benefits. You can enroll the Connecticut sexual harassment training in it. You can have your own training system where you're uploading your custom training, IT security policies that technically are acceptable use policy that people have to be signing off. All that stuff can happen onto it. And this is inexpensive. Like KnowBe4 right now, they just went public and they're ending their fiscal year. And so right now they have like open promotion with basically us. It's $1.50 a user for the next year for security awareness training. So all that stuff, the LMS system, the training, the phishing and phishing your own team, and it dynamically gets harder for some and keeps other people who fall for the free donuts, like keeps those easy. And the people who are really good, it gets harder. Like all that stuff for $1.50, it's normally like $5. So again, if you're interested in that, you can email us or anybody who is doing KnowBe4. But that's the product that we use. A big Magic Quadrant, Gartner Magic Quadrant guy, and it's them and Proofpoint that are like side by side, really leading this industry. And then the last one's backup and disaster recovery. I talk about it all the time, and it's your fastest way to recovery. Like it is IT 101, when things go sideways or anything, having that backup there and being able to recover it quickly. And backup is always in the lens of how much is the data worth, right? How long can my company be down and how much am I willing to pay for that? And it literally, like, it's perfectly linear. Like if I'm doing something that might take 3-4 days to recover, it's relatively inexpensive. If it's 15 minutes, it gets 1 day, it's more expensive, an hour, more expensive, minutes, even more expensive. It's directly linear to basically how long would it really take to recover. The rest of them are bells and whistles behind backup, but that's really when you're looking at, okay, this is $2,000 a month versus $50 a month. That's really the fundamental difference is how much protection do you have for outage.
I think one of the craziest parts about when you talk about like what are the best practices for cybersecurity, that backup is not one of the things that people usually put in there, but is one of the most critical pieces to your cybersecurity practice. You need to have that in place to ensure that if something does happen, that there is a fallback plan. There's something that you can roll back to potentially make that breach even say, hey, this isn't something that is slowing down my business because I can quickly just roll back and go back to my last set of backup data and start to run from there. It's really the biggest thing that'll help you get back up and running as fast as possible. So for me, the next part here is just to talk a little bit about the breaches that happened recently and then the security services that you could put in place to potentially combat some of the costs of what a breach really looks like. So we talked about the Colonial Pipeline a bunch before, but $4.4 million in Bitcoin to the ransomware attackers. That's a serious amount of money for any business, regardless of the side. JBS, another example of one that had to pay $11 million in Bitcoin to the ransomware attackers. And that, for me, the key part here is you're looking at just what the ransomware was, right? Like what was the actual like ransom that they asked for. That doesn't include what the downtime cost for production and the output that those businesses lost because of that, or the just loss of revenue overall. And then the other part, which is extremely hard to measure, is your brand reputation. So every time that a breach happens, that company's reputation starts to go, it's impacted. It's one of the worst things that can happen to a business is any type of relationship capital that you lose. And so a breach is one of the biggest things that impacts that.
And even talking about that, you have Atlanta. Atlanta was one of my favorite topics because I think the whole ransomware was 65 grand at the time. They ended up not paying it, restoring it. They were down for days, but the whole cost was about $11 million. It was half of the IT budget for the year in one shot. So like it's not just the ransomware payments, it's usually far more than that.
So for us, one of the big things that we like to talk about in our security services is looking at it like a 4-tiered approach. And for us, got some different ways that we want you to look at it. So the first one is ensure your business, right? That cyber policy that Foster was talking about before, where a couple of years ago, this was a no-brainer to have because it was so inexpensive and it protected you a bunch. It was
It's like a grand. It was cheap. Yeah.
It was great, right? So that was one of the best things that you could have had. And obviously this depends on the size of your business and it'll scale. But, you know, for us, a cyber policy ranging between $2,000 and $10,000 a year, right? To have that policy in place, it's a no-brainer to have it. Of course, nobody wants to pay for insurance, but when you do get into that car accident, aren't you happy that you had that insurance in place so that you don't have to pay for the person's injury, the car, your car? There's a bunch of different things there. So having that in place is one of the most critical things, especially now, which becomes so much more prevalent with all the cyber attacks.
And having the hygiene is huge here, because like if you, before, no matter how you filled out the survey and insurance, a lot of times it's coming back within like $100 of it. It was like, oh, do you have multi-factor? Oh, do you have this? Do you have this? And now it's very specific questions. And the better you answer the questions, the lower the premium, like insurance should be. And the cost is tripled. The average increase is probably about 150% to a lot of the clients that are renewing it, because we're getting those calls. Our clients are calling us and we're like, does this make sense to you? This is like, why did it get so much more expensive? Is this better coverage? We're like, no, it's just they're paying out. And this covers the ransomware cost, the remediation cost, usually PR, and if you have a data breach, like the coverage for that, if you're protecting people. So there's a lot of stuff built into that cyber policy.
Yep, definitely the bang for your buck within that cyber policy. The other part there is what we call locking the front door, right? So some of the basic stuff that you can do to try to prevent a breach if it ever could potentially happen to you. So security awareness, we talked about a bunch before, but just training your employees to make sure when they leave that they're locking the front door, right? It's making sure that you're not clicking on those links, you're not entering data in for stuff. If you have an email that you think is questionable, bring it up to somebody, send it to Charles IT. We'll let you know whether it's a bad link or not. But that's one of the most important things you can do, the multi-factor, whether it's the text message, the token, the push to your phone, having something that prevents somebody else from being able to get in because they don't have that second form of verification is super important, or even encryption. So if you happen to lose a laptop or something like that, that nobody else can just access it, it's encrypted, you can go ahead and do that. So locking the front door is one of the biggest things there. And then if you don't lock the front door, right, there's also monitoring the front door. So it's making sure that you have someone watching over, making sure that, hey, this is an unusual activity. Foster mentioned MDR and how that 3 a.m. login is suspicious, or this data is going somewhere where it doesn't normally go. What's going on here? It's having somebody there to actually monitor, and then the SIM is there to be able to log that information, right? It's keeping track of the historical, what's going on, within your environment. So monitoring that 24/7, 365, one of the most critical things that you can do. And then the last part, if all else fails, right, you also have a bodyguard at the front door. The virtual Chief Information Security Officer, we call that vCISO services here. That's having someone to act on your behalf, right? So maybe your business doesn't need a full-time in-house Chief Information Security Officer, but that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be somebody there helping ensure that the tools you're putting in place are compliant, that they have the proper security in place, or if you're going to make a change to something, that it's being checked with your security team to make sure that, hey, this is not going to open us up to any type of vulnerability or something outside of what you're just expecting that particular service or tool to do for you, right? It's having someone there to help navigate, whether it's the change that you're about to make, or it's if something were to happen, that's somebody that can act on your behalf to work with insurance to make sure that things are being shut down properly, that you're having the systems that were breached actually have someone go through them, make sure that there's nothing active going on in there anymore, clean that stuff up. And that's really what the virtual CISO services does. So that 4-tiered approach is going to be one of the best ways that you can protect your business.
So I think with that, we threw a ton of information at you. More than happy to answer any questions or anything that come up, and we can kind of take it from there.
We have a few questions in the queue that have come in. One of them is that you mentioned that text messaging is not acceptable multi-factor authentication. Could you mention what some of the other NIST approved methodologies are if text ain't good enough?
Texting it's largely because it can be hijacked or replicated or faked, and that's why it's not approved. Things that are approved are what's called smart tokens. So they call them dumb tokens, where you're kind of reading off a number. The smarter things is that when I log in, it prompts my cell phone and it says, "Oh, would you like to log into this now?" And you just click yes, because I'm generating it. I'm not just reading off a random number. I'm approving that to happen. Other great forms of multi-factor is something you physically have. So they call them YubiKeys or smart cards. So like a lot of people notice they have a little slot on the side of their machine. It's designed for like an ID badge that you can slide in. So when I'm logging into a system, I have to have some other physical medium device proving that I am logging into that. So I can't transmit that card over the internet like I can a text message or fake it. I have to have something physically with me. YubiKeys are kind of like the same thing, but they they plug into a USB drive. So anything that you can also verify another way. So some people use face recognition with a password, but it's something that is very hard to fake.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to hit Foster with a second question, I guess. What is the worst cyber attack or hacking that you've ever seen attempted on one of your clients, and how did you approach it and solve it?
The worst one, I'll bring up probably the most recent that comes to mind. So Laz Parking. Laz Parking is one of our clients. They have parking garages throughout the United States. And so if you Google that right now, like that, they show up online. They have their own flavor of ransomware. They were definitely targeted. And that was the most recent. And we take care of a lot of their patching and some of the basics, but we didn't do all the security. And we take care of their backup. So that was particularly ugly because somebody infiltrated the system. This is all found out after the fact using some tools and things that we helped them. Somebody infiltrated their system. Somebody left an old server 2008 box on. They turned it on for something and forgot to shut it off. It was decommed, but they left it running, even though it wasn't doing anything. And then somebody breached that system. And then from there, they basically played around on the network for about a week or two. And they figured out what was there. And then they actually figured out the backup device was there. And they actually brute forced the backup device, erased all the backups, and then ransomwared the entire environment. And that was particularly bad because the backups were there. Luckily, they called us because we helped manage the backup. And our best practices is that we have kind of like a recycling bin, for rather lack of a better term, but we were able to restore the existing backups. They quickly deployed our MDR solution. We got involved on all the servers because we were only doing a fraction of their equipment at the time. We were able to pinpoint and locate very quickly where that came from. So normally in that situation, a couple things happen. One, stop the bleeding, either shut everything down or install something like MDR that very quickly locates where the source of the pain is. Second part we did is we very quickly had them call insurance and get what they call an instant response team. But Laz Parking, you can call them. They're a great reference for us. I actually had the conversation with them a week or two ago, but they largely credit us to getting the business back up and running. One, for the backup device that we kind of pushed them into, and they're like super thrilled that they had it. And the second one was just the instant response team from the insurance carrier took 2 or 3 days to get back to them and get rolling. And by that time, we already cleared it up and had stuff recovering and moving that. But we deal with compliance in highly regulated industries. So we knew all the best practices of you have to freeze those machines in time. You have to shut them off. You can't delete them. You can't clean them up. We restored from backup. So we did everything forensically accurate to be able to do. And so their insurance still stepped in and helped them through that. So that was probably the most recent ugly situations that they went through. And we were just happy to be able to, so happy they had the backup. The backup is like the last rung that you can go to. And then now we've deployed SIM, which is Security Incident and Event Management. And our MDR is across the board. We're handling all the security updates and we're handling all the backup as well now. So Yeah, they were
That's
super
great.
happy to back them.
One of the other questions that came in is near and dear to my heart as a lawyer, because I'm always having to try to convince clients, make a good, compelling argument for why they should spend money to avert risk. What are some of the best justifications you guys can put forth for spending money on security services for people who have not been penetrated, hacked, or feel they're invulnerable?
That's a great question. So there's a bunch of different reasons why we could try to justify those things. And one of the things I want to bring up is it can happen to anybody, and it can happen at any time. Like, it's not always the large companies that are being targeted, right? It's a breach from a large company might give a bunch of information away from a lot of different people, and then they use their data to try to go and find out if they're logged into anywhere else, and then try to actually use that information to attack other businesses. And so for myself, being the finance guy at Charles IT, trying to justify this, it kind of slapped me in the face just this past weekend. And there was a breach back in the day. So anyone who was in college probably remembers chegg.com or org or whichever one it was. But Chegg is where you got all your textbooks and whatnot. And I had my same email that I had back then, and I used a similar password, well, same password, from that website to one that I have here at Charles IT. And over the weekend, I was dipping my daughter in the ocean for the first time in her life, and my Apple Watch starts dinging. It's like ding, 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 kept going, probably at least 50 times in 5 minutes that it was going off. It was either an awesome group chat or someone was like trying to get into one of my tools. And so I looked, figured out what it was. I was like, holy crap, someone's actually trying to get into this right now, because it kept sending the token to my phone. And I had to like run back to my laptop, go log into that system, quickly change the password. And for me, I'm not someone that I would assume somebody would target, but at the same time, it happened to me. So for honestly, the way to justify the cost is how long can you be without a computer? How long can you be down? Like, what is that impact to you and your business? And if the answer, is you can't afford to be down, the production can't stop, you can't lose revenue, then you should be finding a way to justify some type of security spend, because he mentioned last parking, very little in security services prior to a breach, and then after a breach, lots of money spent in security services. You talk about the Colonial Pipeline, not a lot of money spent on security services ahead of time. If you looked at Colonial Pipeline and a bunch of the news stories that happened directly after, within like a day or two of them being breached, they were job posted out for a virtual CISO. Like, they were looking to bring these people in right after this happened and start to put all those services and tools in place, because you may not think that you need it until you actually need it. And so we always refer security services back to insurance. There's nothing sexy about insurance. Nobody wants to pay for it. Nobody really wants it until they actually need that insurance. So for me, justifying it is paying ahead of time, because the cost down the road of an actual breach and ransomware attack is going to be tenfold what the cost is for the actual services.
Yeah. Last parking was down for a few days. Colonial Pipeline was down for 5 days. Atlanta was down for a week. Like, how much business do you lose for a week? It pays for a lot of security services.
This may be a natural follow-on to the last question, but I also represent a lot of people who are early stage and startup businesses, and they would like a little prioritization here. If you don't have room in your budget for all of the things that you guys have told us about today, in addition to making a wonderful referral to our friends in the insurance business, what would be the most effective thing for someone to start with who's operating on a budget?
I think first and foremost, Sal already said it, security awareness training. That is best bang for the buck. And it's the number one way people get in. Like most ransomware attacks, I forget the exact numbers, like 73 or 78% of them all start with a phishing target, and that reducing that is probably the broadest thing that you can do, because it's not just training about phishing, it teaches you about a bunch of other best practices, and so you just greatly reduce your risk on it, and it's bang for the buck. It's probably one of the best.
If you listen to Foster talk about it before, the bang for your buck, literally the bang for your buck, it's like $1.50 a user per month. Right now,
for this
right,
week or two,
for this week or two to be able to sign up for that, and it's literally dollars to be able to make sure that your team is protected, and that's the widest net that you can cast across your business, because they are your single point of failure. If they click on a link, they have direct access into your system. So for the cost of a couple dollars there, the ability to cover most of your business is one of the biggest things you can do.
Yeah, the second one beyond that is that MDR solution. So I try to push either multi-factor authentication, which stops them from coming in the door, or what's called MDR, which is it is just a royal pain in the butt for the attacker. And so it's watching the door, it's looking at behavior, it's acting as an antivirus, and it just sets up so many hurdles. So like, even if it'll stop them from getting in, and even if they do get in, it will just cut them off at the knees, and then it will just continue to make it difficult. They can't make lateral movements across the network, and there's humans actually looking at it. So let's say somehow you get through all these defenses and somebody gets onto it, the SOC looks at it, and their average time to respond to a security incident is about 30 seconds right now. It's 30 seconds, they go, this is definitely bad, and they click a button, and that computer is completely isolated from the rest of the network. So like, it stops it from like spreading very quickly. So MDR, it's probably $8-10 per computer per month, but it's a great defense, and like, trust me, if there's an easier target, they're going to leave and go and do something else. It just provides so much protection. Most of those, actually, they're so confident in it, they give you like $1 million guarantee that like, you have that software in there, that you won't get ransomware, you won't get this. They kind of try to put their money where their mouth is on it. And then beyond that, for like the third one, the cheap 2FA, like for startups and things, like, yes, text messaging isn't the best, but it's better than no 2FA. Like all those things will usually do it for free. You can go onto your Google account, Facebook, like Snapchat has 2FA, like LinkedIn, everything has the ability usually to turn on 2FA. So turn it on, even if it's sending you an email or a text message or something like that, just turn it on. It won't be the best, or it might be a little clunky because you have like 5 different ways of getting a 2FA, but just put it on something, and you can do that. Like the right way, you're spending $3 to $6 a user a month, but you can do it for free against most of the platforms out there. They'll send you an email, text message, or set up something with like a Google Authenticator or something like that, which is largely free to their systems.
That's great. I think we've answered all the questions that were submitted. So do you guys have something you'd like to wrap up with?
Sure. Yeah, I have a couple, I think, closing thoughts to it. So for me, what to do in the event of a cyber attack is super important. I think most people kind of like freak out at that point. And so the best thing you can do is really shut off the systems ASAP. It's the fastest way to stop the bleeding and reduce your time to recovery. And it forensically freezes everything as well. Like you can't do any more damage. After that, you're calling IT, an MSP, like Charles IT, or you're calling somebody and saying, well, like, what do we do from here? And we can systematically turn things back on and like get with your priorities. And the next thing, and it should be super early on in the process, is call insurance. Because if you take the wrong steps or you digitally change something forensically, they might not cover you because you didn't alert them of the incident, you started doing things on your own, or you're going down the wrong path. They don't want to pay for all this extra recovery that you took the wrong steps on. So a lot of times they will just approve the step that you're already doing, but getting them involved in almost every single one of those policies has a hotline for ransomware now or something like that, where you can call, say, hey, this is going on, do I need to include you or not? And they'll tell you generally the best practices or steps to do, or they get involved. So that's basically what to do.
for me, I think the biggest thing is how an MSP like Charles IT can help, right? If you're looking to start your security practice and start to actually put some things in place, it may not be financially feasible to hire a security person, pay for all the tools. It's a huge financial burden to be able to go and do that the right way and make it effective. And that's why utilizing services from an organization like us at Charles IT, where you have a bunch of security experts, you have a bunch of tools that we can use at our disposal to be able to help set up in a cost-effective way for your organization to be able to take at least some of the basic security practices and get you started on the road to ensuring that you're safe and not subject to a potential attack. So utilizing an organization like Charles IT will help secure your business and ensure that you reduce any downtime.
Yeah, we're focused on it so much more than internal IT who's just trying to keep day-to-day stuff going on. And like Last Parking, again, just using them as an example, they have a full IT team. They're extremely capable. They know all that, but they called us. They're like, hey, like you're reaching out to anybody for help. And like we're just focused on that. And knock on wood, we've never had a client get ransomware, but I can tell you it's our #1 way of getting new clients. And we've done this 100 times. We've seen this movie. We know how it ends. We know what to do. And that's usually where people are reaching out. We're like, because we're not freaking out. We're like, okay, another ransomware thing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We know how to do it. And we just have sheer experience. It's like first time you try to do something versus calling an expert who's done it 100 times before. We'll just be more effective at it. So that's a great point in time to call us for help. And then I think for me, how do you ensure the company's data is secure? We talked about like MDR and that, and then SIM as well. SIM is the security incident event management, and that has a little bit of proactive component. A lot of people think it's something that happens ahead of time to block people. And really what it is it's after the fact monitoring, but it's super cost effective. It's expensive to do, but it's super cost effective whenever you have a problem, because it's the only way to trace back what happened. So basically what's going on is that a SIM collects all the logs, all the analysis, everything that's happened on the network, and they aggregate it all together from the firewall, from the servers, from the multi-factor, from the MDR, and they look at all these events together and they look for correlations. So like Russia knocking on your firewall saying, hey, is there any weak holes here? That's nothing to be concerned about, but that happens. Then a new user gets created on the server, and then a multi-factor goes to Sal. They're like, wait a second, something's wrong here. They correlate all those things. And more importantly, if you do have a breach, the keeping your data secure, you want to know, okay, did those people get into Sal's account to mine Bitcoin and just like use our computer's resources to do that? Or were they trying to steal information? Because to you and your responsibility is, okay, I just had 100,000 records stolen from my clients and their personal information, or were they just using my laptop, like free electricity to mine Bitcoin? That's a very different response and cost and issue that you're dealing with. Or did they get onto the network and they never touched this? They just played it over here in these files, and they were just a bunch of young kids that didn't know what they're doing. Like that's what SIM does. It's expensive to do, but if you ever have an actual breach, there's no replacing it. It's worth every penny.
Yeah, and then the last thing we have here is, which kind of companies are at risk. I think from what we just talked about, it's safe to say that anyone is at risk of a cyber attack. Sal at Charles IT, some of you may not even know who we were before this webinar, and my account was getting attacked over the weekend. So this can happen to anyone at any time. So really the best thing you can do is start putting things in place now to ensure that that doesn't happen to you, down the line.
Well, thank you again, Foster and Sal. We're at the top of the hour, and we appreciate all the practical advice you provided. We're going to take a summer hiatus from our monthly webinars in July and August, but please save the date for when we'll be back September 7, 2021 for our next webinar. Watch your inbox for more details as we get closer to the event. Bye for now.